Hello, bookish friends. It's Ivy Reads back with another book review. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Coven by Harper L. Woods. I actually happen to have the sequel with me here so I can show off all the sprayed edges. This is just the regular deluxe first edition, but I really loved the edges on those. They're very pretty. It's a pretty short read. Like, you can see how thin that book is. Like 10 hours on Libby or Audible. So, I mean, finished it in a day. Um, because obviously I listened to it on double speed, so it took me a single shift at work. Anyway, I would call this a dark, occult, paranormal, enemies to lovers romance. Yeah, we'll say that. I'd give it 3 out of 5 chili peppers. The plot largely focuses on the sexual relationship between the two main characters, Gray and Willow. Willow is a witch from the last line in an extinct bloodline, so she's, the chosen one. And Gray is a vessel that feeds on witch blood, a la vampire style, but he's a demon, but basically a vampire. So, I mean, yeah. And their two kinds are enemies. The witches made a deal with Satan to give blood to the vessels so that they could stay in these vessels permanently versus, I guess, like supernatural style burning through a vessel in a year's time. And in exchange, the devil gave them magic. I gave it 3.5 stars because I was entertained. But the book definitely has a lot of issues that I feel like honestly could have been fixed, giving it, longer, like um, doing a few more drafts, adding some more details. It had the potential to be a great book, I think, but it fell a little short, which was disappointing. Um, I personally don't enjoy when the majority of the plot focuses on sex and a sexual relationship. Like, I like spice in my books, but I prefer that it's a subplot and and that's just my personal preference, like maybe one scene. But you know, when it's every other scene, I get bored. I'm much more interested in the world around them, the relationships around them, how they're navigating, the end of the world and all the issues that are going on. That's just the kind of reader I am. So if heavy spice and romance is not enjoyable for you as a plot, then this may not be the book for you. I would also caution you to read the trigger warnings because this is a very dark romance. The people in it are not good by any stretch of the imagination. There is questionable consent and slightly more than questionable consent going on, as well as ritualistic murder and some details about gore. Um, so just be careful going in. Stay safe. Um, let's see. So I guess we'll just get into I'm going to start with what I didn't like about the book, which the first 75% was not as good as the last 25% for me because the last 25% was almost entirely plot driven, whereas the first 75 was mostly focusing on the enemies to lovers build up between Gray and Willow. And um I mean, it was funny. I do feel that it was well executed and that the sex scenes were well written. So as far as spice goes, it was well done. Um, one of the things that really bothered me is that all the side characters were like props. They felt like the entire book felt like, excuse me, a play that took place on a stage and we never moved from that stage. Like, the curtain would go down and come back up and maybe a couple things would be different, but it never, yeah, everything felt very two-dimensional. So I would criticize that. There were some interesting characters, especially her great, 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 so on and so forth, grandmother. Um, and the other half of the coven, who were basically all walking animated corpses. And that was fascinating. And they didn't do a whole ton with that. And I don't know that they necessarily were, not that we saw enough of the characters for them to have a baseline for consistency, but the great, 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 so on, grandma, her behavior felt sometimes at times inconsistent, and that bothered me. Um, and so, yeah, I very poor characterization in this book. Gray and Willow as characters, I do feel like were fleshed out well enough. Like I felt like they had characters, although Willow's character was inconsistent in that she's the most powerful witch there. Obviously, she's more powerful than everyone there, and the biggest, baddest lady, and she can put the coven in their place. But at the same time, she's a delicate female in distress who needs to be saved, and it seemed like she could never decide which one she was, or she was the female in distress for the purpose of Gray saving her, which irritated me. Because if you're going to give a character that much power, I want to see them use it. And she did, and when she did, it was awesome. But then when she didn't, you're like, why? Like, what stopped you? Um, so much of the circumstances of the plot didn't make a lot of sense. Like, her entire reason for going to the university is to find her ancestors' bones, because half of her lineage is necromancers and they get their power from bones. And her aunt, who was the last necromancer there, was murdered, and the bones were with her. And her father, who severely abused her, sent her there to, I guess, avenge. Well, I don't know if avenge is the right word, but make sure her aunt got a proper burial and get the bones back, because that belongs to their line and that's where their power is. Why she was willing to do anything for her father, who never loved her or did a single nice thing for her and abused her horribly, is beyond me. Why she didn't kill him and still do this if she felt compelled to honor her aunt, beyond me. Like, she was very afraid that they would discover her father, because male witches have to either choose between having a family and procreating or keeping their powers, because they don't want any witch to come from two bloodlines, which Willow does, and have the power of two bloodlines. They want the power to come from the mother. So her father was, kept secret and smuggled out, so he had a child with a green witch, which is plant magic. So Willow has both, which is verboten. But she was afraid of them finding him and finding out where she came from. But if she just killed him, that really would have solved the problem. So I don't get that. Um, I the whole it felt like the plot was trying to fill like a teacher student kink, kind of, because the Gray is the headmaster of the school, but he's also the coven's errand boy who went to go get Willow from her house and force her to come. And then he's also the history teacher. And there was talk of classes, but there were no other classes. There was one class scene, and Gray was the teacher. Like, and this brings back to the other characters are just named props, because we never saw any other classes. They never learned any anyway. That was very bothersome. And it was weird. Like, if they wanted him to have the authority of the headmaster, then he needed to have some distance. If they wanted him to be a teacher, then he needed to not be the headmaster. Um, Either would have worked. And a lot of the things in there were like, I don't mind tropes, but I hate when they're like stuck in there and they're so obvious, but not in a funny way. Like, the school uniform is a mini skirt. like because people need to be sex. I don't know. Like why a school uniform would be a provocative schoolgirl uniform that you might find in a certain type of adult video is beyond me. Or why when the vessels need to feed from witches, they have to be blindfolded and chained like other adults content. Like it was weird, not in a good way. It felt so forced and just I don't know, it didn't fit. And so it you lose that immersion in a story when things just feel so baffling and out of place. Like it just didn't fit, in my opinion. Um, so what I did well what else I didn't like was in chapter 29 there are so two students have died, and the other students have decided that it's her fault because she's the last of her bloodline, and the rest of the coven wants to protect her, which makes this her fault. And a random disembodied voice said her name, which means she's probably the next victim or was the intended victim, and therefore this is her fault. Like, okay, sure. And she just lets them start wailing on her, and she doesn't fight back. And she's like, I understand what it's like to be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you. And they're like, okay. And bloodying her up. Like, it was so stupid because in the beginning of the book, to put one of the coven in his place, she uses vines to come up and, like, just forces him to sit, but like, sit down. Why couldn't she have done that with them? Like, she didn't need to hurt them, but she didn't also have to let herself be a victim. Like, it felt more like she has a martyr, being a martyr kink, or that she was deliberately letting herself be hurt so that Gray would have to take care of her because she wanted that. But of course, that wasn't said, so I don't, it was weird. It was weird, and it made the following scene where Gray is taking care of her weird because why is this powerful witch being a damsel in distress? It didn't fit. So I didn't like that. And I don't like when they take a strong character and make them weak so the man has a purpose in taking care of them. Like, I don't know, relationships and romances, they're supposed to be strong where you are weak. So don't deliberately weaken her to make her have some way to save her. Find a way that she does need help, because magic and protection shouldn't be it, because she's like the most powerful witch. Anyway, so that scene really bothered me. Also, in chapter 34 was basically a copy and paste scene from Beauty and the Beast with the wolves, and the beast comes and saves her. And like, I don't know if this entire thing was meant to be a Beauty and the Beast retelling, because like there's a mirror involved. But if so, if it was intended to be that, it failed in my opinion, because was not enough similarities. But then you have that random, like, literally copied and pasted scene from Beauty and the Beast with the wolves and the beast saving her. That was weird. Now, let's talk about what I liked. So, in the last 25% of the book, it actually becomes plot focused, and I was so happy. And like the answers started rolling in, and the stakes started getting higher, the betrayals and who to trust, and this everything just like when that part came around, I was on the edge of my seat. I was so entertained, and I was honestly like, where was this in the first three-fourths of the book? Because this is awesome. And so that is why it got the 3.5. Otherwise, I probably would have put it at a 3, because the ending's great. It is so climactic. It's so exciting, and I cannot wait to start the next one, which I'll probably have finished tomorrow. So we'll see. Um, but so okay, so what I liked was the stakes that were raised in the final 25%. I liked Willow's character because she was strong, and in situations where it would be easy to give up and get depressed, she tried to fight. She was soft in the right ways often. Um, and I liked Gray's character. He was an absolute butthole, but he was funny about it. And I can usually forgive a butthole if they're funny. I think most people can. Um, talking out of his behind. Anyway. And the fact, I think that made him like redeemable, I'm going to say that loosely, was that he, through the entire book, always wanted her. Like, there was never any question of him wanting her. And so that at least, that consistency made for a good enemies to lovers pairing, even if, in the end she hates him. We'll see. We'll see what happens. So let me know what you guys thought of the book. If you agree with my points, if you thought I was too harsh, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks.